This is supposed to be a budget that prevents the spread of violence. Instead, they have a budget that stirs it up.
Really? I don't know the genesis of those remarks. He's talking sheer numbers, which is impossible because this is the most money the federal government has ever committed in any budget, north of $4 trillion. But we've got former Democratic leader of the Ohio Senate, Capri Cafaro, joining us, U.S. News and World Report contributor, Ashley Pratt, Kingsview Asset Management, Scott Martin. Scott, and with you, your thought on what she seems to be saying there, that because Republicans are busy just hacking things and cutting budgets, that it's going to breed trouble. What do you think of that?
Neil, you know, these outbursts from Nancy Pelosi these days are just almost a daily occurrence, aren't they? I mean, whether it's saying hundreds of thousands are going to die because of the health care bill passage or all the other amazing things that have come out of her mouth lately. You know, the scary part is that it's the power of suggestion. You know, it's the things that she's telling the American people, while very histrionic, are damaging. They're misleading, and they incite things like, in this case, violence, in my opinion. And so being in the leadership position that she amazingly still is in is a scary thought, to be communicating like this and telling the American people this, when instead she should be rallying her leaders, rallying her compatriots to say, you know what, let's work with the Trump administration and figure out a way we can get policies and procedures in Washington to finally work for all Americans, not just ones in her party that she's concerned about.
But, Capri, if I'm a Republican, I'm trying to say or entertain these overtures of the Party of Democrats to work with them on stuff, and then I hear a remark like that we're breeding violence and furthermore killing people. Why the hell would I want it?
Look, I mean, you know, when you are leader, and as you mentioned, I was on a much smaller scale in the Ohio Senate for a number of years. What you say matters, and you set the tone for your caucus. And so I don't think that it is productive for Leader Pelosi to utilize such incendiary language. And I would imagine that there are members of her caucus that are probably trying to work on an individual basis with other members across the aisle, trying to find some level of consensus. If I were her, I would be really, you know, drilling down on some of the details of this budget that the Congressional Budget Office, you know, really went to town on, as far as its potential impact and how it's not necessarily going to create economic growth. And I can go on a whole laundry list of programs that would be touched, from the Appalachia Regional Commission to community development block grants to school lunches, and that impact not only vulnerable communities, but the potential for economic growth in struggling areas like Ohio and like rural America. And talk about those things. Get the American people on your side to, you know, gain momentum for your agenda, rather than trying
to, that is a fair way
pot.
to do it. We could disagree over the spending priorities and all of that, but I think you always lose things when you talk about, you know, killing people, or it's going to lead to violence, and then blame the right for all the violence, when in fact most of the, not you, Senator, but a lot of the violence has been inspired. We've certainly seen on the left far more than the right here, and I go to Berkeley and everything else. Leaving that aside, Ashley, what I'm wondering about is, if this is the way the leaders are going to speak, there isn't going to be bipartisan anything. So Republicans, it could explain why they're cobbling together yet again another health care rework, hoping, praying, maybe throwing something up in the air, thinking something is connecting on health care to set the stage to Texas, that they can't work with the Democrats. What do you think?
Well, Neil, I think there's a lot of things at play here. There was a poll released yesterday that showed over 70% of Americans want Republicans to work with Democrats on this health care bill. That's because we're seeing such stagnation with it. It's going nowhere. So in these times where there's hyper-partisan, and hyper-partisan nature right now in American politics, there's a lack of leadership on the Democratic side, which means there's no consistent messaging. That allows for outbursts like this from, you know, Speaker or Leader Pelosi, who just comes out and says these things. That does nothing to help the American people. It does nothing to help anything legislatively get passed. And I think what we need to recognize is that, yes, while there may be disagreement with policy and there may be disagreement with who is president of the United States, at the same time, things need to get accomplished, and it will only benefit the American people if everybody comes together from both sides of the political spectrum.
Well, don't hold your breath for that.
But,
and
Neil,
I'd love to be wrong.
Is,
I'd love to be wrong, guys.
I
Scott
hope we're
Martin,
wrong.
I'm looking at the market, and I'm looking even today's, you know, slight sell-off notwithstanding. The markets are up appreciably on this, the 6-month anniversary of the Trump presidency, even more since he was elected. Largely, I would imagine, on the belief that they're going to get something that they like tax cuts. I don't know about the health care thing. So they seem to have faith that they get past all this. Do you?
I'm getting more and more worried by the hour, frankly. I mean, it's turning me gray, believe it or not. And I'll tell you what's interesting, Neil. You know, thank goodness the S&P 500 companies, I mean, we just had two of them out with earnings just minutes ago, in Microsoft and Visa. I mean, thank goodness these companies are so well run and their earnings growth is so powerful that they're able to overcome the stymieing that the Democrats are doing in Congress, because that's putting the large agenda at risk here, which is exactly what you said, which is what the S&P 500, the stock market, your 401k, I believe, is somewhat hinging on here. So the longer they take to fight this out, the worrisome more it gets for America.
All right, guys, I want to thank you all. Cutting short a little bit here to pass along some breaking news.